Boom. Yeah. Okay. We are live. Yeah? Yes. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Life Matters Podcast with Bel and myself, Ms. Keyonna Monroe. So, it's Sunday and it's September. And, we hope all of you guys are doing well. And wherever in the world you guys are watching, we wanted to kind of pop into your home, your car, wherever that may be, and just have like just a quick intimate conversation. This probably won't be the last for Bel and I to talk about this. But it's September, which is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. And that is something I felt like let's just kind of tap in at the very top of the month to have that discussion, just to give you guys a little bit of insight and the mindset around what most people think about. And I can't speak for all, but I know that for me, I've worked with a lot of girls in my organization, those who are on suicide watch. They're usually, my youngest is as young as 11 years old, all the way up to 17, 18 years old. And doing that, I have kind of like an insight and understanding about some of the things that they think about. And just even in my own personal story, I've struggled with thoughts and ideation of suicide, not wanting to be here. So I'll dive a bit into my thoughts and my experiences with myself and with others during this time. Welcome, Bel. Say hello to everyone.
Good evening, everyone from Kigali. Really important that we have this conversation. I feel like suicide is one of those topics that are really quite taboo, and they're very heavy. And so I get it, but I think it's something that most people go through in different seasons at varying ranges. And so I think it's really important that we have this conversation at the beginning of the month, and also really around the awareness and the prevention, because I think we all have in our power to support somebody. And so just also looking out for some of the red flags and really hearing people when they're speaking. I think sometimes we get so busy with life that we don't actually hear the people in our lives, and they are giving out these signals. And I think we need to just kind of all learn to slow down and be attentive to burdens that people carry that they can't fully tell you about, but just be more sensitive to people. So hopefully we'll get into a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think, oh, well, suicide, that would never happen to anybody I know or anybody that I love, or that's not something that I will ever think about. And I think that, when it comes to suicide ideation, I think it has no boundaries. And I think it doesn't just happen to those who've experienced trauma, but it can happen to anybody. Stress, depression, holiday season is really a big time for depression, and society thinks that for the most part holidays are just meant for fun and holidays are meant to be spent with loved ones, but you don't think about those who have lost loved ones, or for those who are struggling with financial struggles and hardships, and it can be very, very overwhelming. Sometimes the holidays can be very, very isolating, and people tend to feel alone. I think that suicide awareness begins with acknowledging, most of the time, the silent battles that a lot of us deal with on a day-to-day basis, where we don't really talk to anybody all the time. And therapy is something that people are starting to get into the habit of getting used to and talking about and applying what they learn in therapy, or trying out therapy for the first time, right? But not everybody. Some people still suppress and keep things to themselves, and they haven't gotten to the point where they reach out for therapy or reach out to somebody. And it is a mindset sometimes about how other people will view or judge or critique or be harsh or shame and guilt you for the things that you're feeling. And it's really about understanding that despair and levels of hopelessness can weigh heavy on people's heart, even when they wear a smile outside. And it's our responsibility, as a world where we take care of one another and we look out for one another for the sake of humanity, to listen and be present and offer support without judgment. I think that the loneliness is one of the biggest things that one needs to consider when dealing with either just cutting, right? Cutting is one of the things that I've dealt with some of my girls, and usually they go from cutting to suicide because they are starting the process of managing pain in ways that are unhealthy, right? And looking at signs and listening to people and being able to show up and paying attention when people aren't thinking, I can do this with somebody else, and I am not alone in this. And when you start recognizing behaviors and patterns that are showing, a lot of the times those things are hidden in plain sight. But what do you think about that?
I think you said something, silent battles, and I think a lot of people go through things, and like you said, you could have a smile, but you're still dealing with a private battle. And I don't think I feel like sometimes even the battles, we're going through stuff that we don't even understand, and so I don't think the point is I need to be able to articulate everything that I'm
Right,
going through for me to get help.
right,
Um, I find that sometimes we feel like, well, she's not telling me what's going on, so I can't help her. I don't think that's the point. I think sometimes people are going through battles that they don't even know how to articulate. And sometimes they do know how to articulate, but there's a lot of pain or shame, etc. I think the point is what you said around loneliness. If you feel lonely and you feel unheard, and the reality is you can be lonely even in a group of people, you can be lonely even in a marriage or in a friendship,
mm-hmm,
right? It's a feeling of not feeling heard
mm-hmm,
or um, understood. So again, I don't have to understand your whole story, but I need to feel like there's a space for me in this relationship or in this friendship or in this family or in this marriage, um, that I am heard. And so I think that's also important, that like you're saying, it's you can go through loneliness in extreme trauma, but I think there's so many people who who've experienced a suicidal thought in a quote unquote, normal situation, because life can just get very burdensome. So you can go through a season of maybe financial stress, or go through a season of just things not working out. And I know in COVID, a lot of people really felt isolated, like physically isolated, and that led to a lot of suicidal thoughts because they just suddenly felt um, confused and removed from their usual routine. There's
mm-hmm,
a lot of stuff, when I look at a lot of things around the technology and the advancement of technology, there's this sort of anxiety and hopelessness with people saying, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do, because we put so much purpose in work, right?
right,
And when people get made redundant or people start anticipating changes in the workforce, there's this like heaviness and hopelessness that
mm-hmm,
comes. And I think when you match that with loneliness, and like I said, loneliness can be really physical loneliness or just emotional, spiritual loneliness, where you are separated. You can be in a group, but you're still separate because you feel like nobody hears you. It's a really dangerous thing, and I think it's really important for us to recognize that. Like recognize, um, I know for me, like sometimes I get into a very busy season,
mm-hmm,
and I'm now learning like, hey, you've got to like firstly recognize, like, be a friend to yourself, and secondly, like stop and listen to the people in your life. I can't listen
yeah,
to everybody, but the people in my life, like stop and like check in on them, because we can be so overwhelmed with just day-to-day life and work and running around and trying to make money and trying, we had like a big transition this year. So I felt like for a long time I was just stressed,
mm-hmm,
trying to just figure things out and like really burying my head in the sand, because and it's not a bad thing. I'm just trying to figure things out and trying to reestablish and do this whole transition and move and work and all of this stuff. But
mm-hmm,
then you find that you're so goals that you have to step back to
Mhm.
actually say, hey, how are you? Like how are you? Not like a fleeting what's up, but like how are you? Spending time with people and hearing, like actually hearing where they are, and you hear it through their words
Mhm.
and the way they compose themselves. And I
Yeah.
feel like, especially in this season, as we come up to the festive season, and coupled with the end of the year, where people start reassessing their lives and start saying, like, I set out to do all these things this year, and I haven't really achieved half of the things that I set out. There's this sort of like self-reflection that we all go through, plus all the holiday season, plus just things, maybe being delayed. Really spending time with the people who are in our circle of influence and just saying, like, how are you doing? Like, really doing? And how can I be of support? Because sometimes it's just a conversation of that person really feeling heard and feeling loved that changes everything.
Yeah. I think asking the question without thinking that you're a burden, right? Or thinking that you're nagging. And then asking when you ask someone how they're doing, like be be ready to be a container, right? For people to pour their heart out and pour their
Yeah.
vulnerabilities to, because a lot of people can really pick that up.
Yeah.
Um, Bernard said, don't compartmentalize things, communicate, and make sure you have good people around you to talk. I completely agree with that.
Mm.
I think a lot of times people suppressing and hiding behind a mask and feeling very, very lonely, and the suppressing is a big part of the loneliness, which also emerges usually when people feel disconnected from other people,
Yeah.
when the bonds that people are supposed to have, or when you think you have with somebody, are fragile or frail or broken or inconsistent, or people are not dependable or unreliable or very harsh and critical. Most people feel like, well, I'm not going to talk to them because the relationship feels like this. The experience that
Yeah.
I have with them doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel supportive. And that feeling of isolation that you get when you feel like you can't talk to anybody is usually like a burden that weighs down your spirit, your mind, your everything. And in that mindset state that people have, most people feel like, I can't talk to anybody. The pain is unbearable. Their struggles are struggles that other people don't have or maybe can't relate to. The lack of relatability that they feel with other people. And, I think that loneliness is not just the absence of the people of around you, but it is the quality of the people that you have in your circle, that your crowd of friends. This is why people have that saying where you can feel lonely in a crowded room because you feel misunderstood or you don't feel seen. You might not feel valued, and it's in that silent suffering of being crowded around a silent room but not being seen that leads to a feeling of like despair. And I think that suicide is a very tragic response to what one feels like unbearable emotional pain, or pain that's
Yeah.
hard to endure. And it's, to me, it is like the signs that they give for needing somebody, and the loneliness, inserting words and language that they tend to use is a plea for help and relief. And they usually use suicide to end any type of suffering that they feel like
Yeah.
is never going to happen. And breaking that cycle of loneliness has a big thing to do with connection and not living so much inside your own bubble, but making yourself available to other people, whether it's just a listening ear or being a soundboard for people to bounce things off of, and give compassionate feedback and compassionate opinions that support what the other person is going through, not necessarily just, this is what I think you should do, or you're crazy. And it really is offering a level of compassion and empathy that we don't really give enough people. Compassionate,
Yeah.
compassionate language, compassionate kindness, and empathy. And even though it's not something that you might have gone through, right? the human experience of feeling broken and being in pain and feeling levels of despair, that is the human experience. Bernard said this is mainly what veterans deal with. That's very true. Veterans deal with that a lot of times. Bel, you know, we deal with survivors of sexual and assault and domestic violence, you know, looking for ways where, for example, I've never experienced war or being in the military or seen death in that way. And especially death when it comes to veterans, I was told that military people look at each other as brothers and sisters versus we look at each other as friends, even though Bella's like, my family is my sister, but going to war with someone else, right? And then losing someone that you've gone to war with in battles, like losing a family member multiple times in a tragic, traumatic type of way, and then going back home, wherever home is for you, and then trying to get back into regular society and normal life and all of those things. That is not normal. And the things that you carry around, it's hard to express that, right, around people who've never experienced what it is that you've experienced. And though I have not experienced war, I have experienced many, many, many internal battles, not to compare, right? But it is still a level of humanity where there's a loneliness and there's an isolation, feeling like no one is going to understand what it is that you've gone through. And in my personal battle, you know, you and I have talked about that, where I feel like I just feel so alone and I have no one to talk to, where I feel I can express the level of pain and the level of trauma without those fears of judgment or critique or shame, and not feeling like I have enough safety in my circle, or not wanting to burden other people with my day-to-day struggles and my day-to-day battles. And I don't want to dump on people, right? But I say this to say, Bernard, U.S. veterans deal with it in so many different ways. Thanks for addressing this topic. You're welcome. And even with you listening, Bernard, finding a person, even if it's just one person, where you say, I have a really hard battle and it is hard for me right now, and I actually need help. And support for me looks like fill in the blank, right? Help for me right now looks like, and then fill in the blank, because sometimes we don't always know what people have the capacity to give, or those who want to help don't know how to help and are afraid that they can make things worse. So sometimes we need to encourage other people of how to help us, right? Those like me, I'm always kind of trying to put myself not necessarily in somebody else's shoes, because I haven't experienced what they've experienced, but I try to put myself in the center of humanity's box and step outside of my bubble, so that I can say, I can relate to you on a human level, maybe not an exact experience, but on a human level. And I want you to know that you're not alone, and you can share what you need to share with me. And you let me know what help and support looks like, so that I can show up for you. And I tell people all of the time, on both ends of the spectrum, is when you don't ask for help, sometimes you rob people of the opportunity who love you to show up for you in the way that they can love you best, right? And it would break my heart that someone who I love doesn't give me the opportunity to love them, and I lose them because they didn't feel as if they could talk to me about things that were bothering them, and I would have dropped everything to support and love and honor, you know, whatever emotion, and validate whatever the experiences that they're having, right?
I think it's so important, and you know, I think that feeling of I'm going through this, nobody else understands, nobody else has gone through this, I am alone. It's like such a lie that we tell ourselves. And I feel like all those things, like I always say, the things that we keep hidden, they will always fester, right? It's always when you expose things to the light that it it becomes clear what it actually is. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's so important that we can, whatever stage we're in, and that's what I said, like it can be really, really messy. Like you, I've never been to war, so I don't know, but it's like you're saying, like, how do we allow people to even just say, like, I am struggling right now with blank and
Mm-hmm.
I need support. But when we are going through things, we don't have to expect that person to have gone through the same thing. It's just, does the person have the capacity to just help me, walk me through this? I remember I had a season, and I don't even know what triggered it. Keyonna, I've spoken to you about this when I
Mm-hmm.
was young. I was living in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there was a death in like our circle, but I suddenly started experiencing suicidal thoughts, which was something that was very, very um, odd. We had a very close friend. The only thing I can link it to is that we had a very close friend who passed away very suddenly and very tragically. And I think it forced me to really like think about life and like how fleeting it is.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a couple that I absolutely loved and absolutely looked up to. And for me, they were like the model marriage, model family. And then they were like torn apart through like crazy tragedy. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so I went through this season of just having suicidal thoughts. Like I'd be walking around and I would just have like this voice. And it wasn't something I was used to. But even in that season, I was kind of like, this is kind of weird. Like this feels awkward. But I remember messaging my mom and just saying, okay, I don't know what's going on. Like I keep getting these weird thoughts. And she helped me walk through. She was living in a different country, but she helped me walk through that season. And I really realized the importance, because I feel like stuff that we keep to ourselves. She
Mm-hmm.
was going through that. She was not physically in the same room. I couldn't fully articulate what was happening because it was just like constant bombardment. And I wasn't in a necessarily stressful period of life. I had just gone through this very horrible situation. So I think my subconscious was really grieving more than I recognized. But it wasn't her having all the right science or the right language, and she wasn't a counselor, but just the fact that you could expose that lie to the light helped
Mm-hmm.
me that season. I think we really have to be conscious about, when we're going through things. And I know people get hurt because sometimes we trust people who then hurt us. But we've got to kind of build up that trust again. But we really have to be able to say, like you said so well, I am feeling like this. I may not be able to give you all the details about what I'm going through. And I think when we are helping people, we should also, it's not always necessary for you to know all the details, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going through X. I can't give you all the details, but I really need support. And support to me looks like this. And support might be, I just need to get out for a walk. Can you go for a walk with me?
Yeah.
Silence. Support might be, I'm not able to like take care of the kids right now. Could you take the kids over for the weekend just so I have some space? And I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to be better family members, better friends, and like I said, be connected in our souls, that we can anticipate things like that, and we can stop. And I love how you said, like, give me the opportunity to love you. I may not be able to love you perfectly. I may not get it all correct, but give me the opportunity to love you and to honor you where you are.
Right.
And when you're going through stuff, don't feel like it's a burden. It might be a burden for some people, but there's somebody in your circle or in your family where it is not a burden. And they will be like, I may not fully understand, but I am available. And that's all you need. You need somebody who's available and somebody you can be honest with and say, can you just help me walk through this journey?
I agree. I think that sometimes we underestimate the power of we, right? I think that we have a mindset about what suicide is. Bernard said suicide doesn't just happen during the holidays. And you're correct. It happens all throughout the year, and it can happen to anyone. Someone recently just put a post of her cousin who passed away right after having children, and said, I don't think I paid attention enough to the signs, and I kept trying to tell her she's strong and that she's resilient and she can get through it. And instead of asking her what she needed, and paying attention to things that she was saying, which was, I need a break. I'm tired. This is new for me. Um, I don't have a babysitter. I need some support. And she said, I never thought that could be considered as suicidal, but suicidal thoughts aren't always, I want to die. It's also, I feel trapped. I feel like I need a way out. I feel like I'm a burden to the people that I love. Things like, I don't want to kill myself, but, I wonder how it would feel to be unalive. I don't understand the point and purpose of my life anymore. I don't see a future anymore, and I need to find a way to escape my thoughts. And I'm in pain, or I don't want to be in pain anymore. I can't endure life the way that it is, and I just don't believe things will get better. Like, those are the things that most people are kind of not paying attention to, and they mirror that back with, oh, you're just going through, this too shall pass, or this is just a temporary season in your life, or you're strong, or you can get through it. A lot of times people don't want to be seen as weak or be looked at as like a victim. So sometimes that's another reason why, they don't necessarily share a whole lot, and it doesn't necessarily have a look. And so we are not focusing enough on people's mental and emotional health, because we don't think that suicidal is real life for the people that we love, because we would never thought that that's something they would do. We just had one of the young women, I think she was Miss, I don't know, I don't want to speak incorrectly, but she was Miss Universe, Miss America, one of the pageant winners, I'll say that, one of the pageant winners, who jumped off of her balcony floor in New York at a penthouse floor, and nobody would have ever thought. You see, this happened so many times, and but they looked so happy, and they looked so, fill in the blanks, but everyone is fighting a battle in some way, shape, or form, whether they talk about that or not. And I think that we need to check our level of feeling of self-absorbed and living in our bubble and being so harsh and quick to anger and critiquing and all of that. And it still buries itself into loving yourself first. Because when you love you and you and you realize the type of love and support that you need out of love for yourself, then you should be able to extend that level of love and understanding and grace, right? When you notice that somebody else feels it, what you would need for somebody, and what you would want for someone to give it to you. And in that, right, we don't recognize the power of we. I do. And I think, instead of saying, I can't help you, or I think you need to go to therapy, or you need to do this, or you have this, or I believe in you, or I think you're strong, or it can be, I don't know what you're going through, but we are going to get through this together. We are going to figure out some solutions, right? I don't want you to feel like you're going through this alone. We can talk this out. We can figure this out. We will get through whatever it is together. And however long it takes is however long it takes, because we are in this together. And there is no you alone, and there's no me alone. This is we. We live in a world where it's all of us. We all need somebody. We all need help. We all have something. And to force somebody to have to do hard things alone, right? And to go through pain alone, and to witness someone's pain and lack the genuity and compassion and empathy to offer the option of walking alongside, to offer a listening ear. You can lose someone for life because you refuse to give them an hour of your time,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever it is that they needed, or conversation, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And everyone is not strong. Everyone doesn't have it
Yeah.
all together.
And I think especially, when you were talking about mothers, I feel like there's this whole, I was having this conversation with my husband this morning about mothering, and it's such a hard job.
Mm,
And
mm,
you say to somebody like, I work in an office, I'm a manager, I have these responsibilities, I know you don't get a lot of days off in the US compared to Europe, etc. But you get your holidays off and there's like built in all these things. But
mhm.
then for mothers, it's like you're just supposed to be happy all the time, have it all together all the time. And I think especially for new mothers, the number of, and this is especially true in the Black community, the number of postpartum depression that happens that we don't talk about is really criminal, because you're supposed to just be happy. You've got this child and just figure it out, and you want to be like a superwoman and do everything. And it comes with a lot of burden. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes I remember my best friend saying, I like I love my kids, but I also like having time away from my kids.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
sometimes as mothers, it almost feels like, oh, that's so bad, Why are you saying that? Like how but it's the truth. It's the
yeah.
truth. And we've got to be so sensitive. I really think like there's got to be a lot of we around young mothers and new mothers, helping them and not making them feel like they've got to be these super women, and they're like, I'm a biblical wife, I can and it's like, calm down. Like, these biblical wives got a whole bunch of help, so stop doing that. Like, you want to do everything by yourself, and we're so careless with our words because we're like, oh, you can do this, you're strong, you're a Black woman, you've got this, your mama did this, and all this kind of stuff, and the person is like overwhelmed, and they keep telling you, I'm tired, I'm not sleeping well, I'm tired, I'm struggling, he's
Mhm.
not feeding, like all of these signals, and all we keep saying is your mama did this, right? And I feel like we've got to be just a lot more sensitive with the way, and sometimes, if you've been strong and you've gone through that kind of thing very well, doesn't mean that somebody else, we don't all have the same level of strength and
Mhm.
talents. But I find like there's a lot of postpartum issues and we never really talk about it.
Yeah,
you
we're
know
gonna
yeah,
actually dive into that very
yeah,
soon.
people are great.
To bring on a postpartum therapist that she's
Yeah,
amazing, and she works with mothers and fertility and all of that. And I think that Kimberly
you
says
should do.
it can be very lonely and scary. Um, to One thing that people don't always understand either is that not only as a mother, and we're mothers, right? Do you have to try to keep everything together for yourself and your mental and emotional health? But we live in a day and age where we also have to monitor and be mindful of our children's mental health and their
Mhm.
emotional health. You know me, I work with tons of young people, and with them being suicidal because of the pressures of school, the bullying, figuring out who they are, figuring out what rules they're supposed to follow, and how to be an authentic version of themselves when they
Yeah,
realize, as they uncover and discover who they are without conforming and shape shifting into societal standards of what is popular, what is acceptable, beauty standards and all of those things. So you have all of these things with social media and entertainment for your children, but also to be mindful of that with yourself, and cook and clean and run a household and do work and tend to all of your own priorities and self-care needs. And this is why I said the whole man was not meant to be here alone at all. At all. God said we are not here to be here alone, and we're not. And
Yeah.
we shouldn't force another person to try to do this thing called life alone. It can
Yeah.
be as simple when it comes to moms. It is be a part of a mother's group, and if you don't have one, talk to some family, talk to some friends, look on Eventbrite. You have to find a way to prioritize the care for yourself, right? But it takes a village, and it takes a qualifying community. It's not just a village, it's who's in your village, right? Who is what for you in your village, and how are you supporting? Have you ever asked yourself? And I tend to do that, and I ask people around me who I love, how are you experiencing my friendship in your life? What would I need to do more of? How can I show up for you more? How can I be more supportive of you? I always do a temperature check, scale of 1 to 10. Where are we at mentally and emotionally before we start talking about what we have to work on and all of those things? Where are you mentally? Where are you emotionally? Where do I need to pour before we start the day? Right. And
Yeah.
it's the little things. And to all of those who, are on either side of the spectrum, ask yourself, how can I vocalize what it is that I need from my circle, right? So that they can help me. Because am I alone because I'm not speaking up? But even with that, how am I showing up for other people? How am I asking the questions without being invasive? And kind of overstepping into their privacy. And it's using certain language, but it's being able to do it with empathy and compassion and really listening and paying attention. How's school going for you right now?
Yeah.
How's it going with you and the relationship in your marriage? What's heavy for you? How's it going with the kids? How's work? How are you handling the day-to-day in work?
Yeah.
You know, where can I, like, what do you need? Where do you need support in any of those areas? Do you need a listening ear? And it's not easy to balance that. It was very hard for me it took me a long time to get into therapy, because I really felt like my story was so significantly unique, and my experiences were going to be experiences that most people don't relate to. It's almost harder, and this is the story I told myself. It's harder to share my story, and it to be dismissed or minimized, or critiqued or shamed, or for someone to say, yeah, I just don't know how to help you. Believe it or not, those words as a response to my level of vulnerability is actually more hurtful and more harmful than me just keeping it to myself.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's like a double-edged sword of asking someone to share, but making sure that you are somebody, you check your ego when you are having conversations with other people, because remembering
Yeah.
that it's not about you, and asking yourself, how am I working on being a container and a safe space for
Yeah.
hard and heavy conversations with the people that I love, so that they feel safe and comfortable enough to open up to me? Like, how do I give primary love to the people that I love? And for
Yeah.
those who have followed me long enough, it's something that I've talked about. But for those who don't, primary love, right, is the ability to create a safe space for the people that you love to be vulnerable and authentically themselves without fear of condemning, judgment, and harsh critique. It is creating that space for them through communication. So how you communicate, nonverbal communication, verbal communication, active listening, all of those are a part of safety and communication with somebody that we love.
Yeah, so important. I mean, just I love that. I think it's not about having all of the answers. And when you have friends who are going through stuff, I think we've got to, as people who are listening, who are, like you said, being a safe container. It's not about this is really awkward, this is overwhelming. I felt like that a lot when I started working with survivors, and like the stories were very overwhelming for me, and I really felt so unqualified all the time. And that's not to say that you as a friend replaces a counselor at all. Like where you are able to get proper counseling, please get counseling. But I feel like as a friend, or like helping in this area, I always felt underqualified. I just felt like I don't know this. Like I don't know how I'm going to say it. And I walked into some of these conversations feeling really awkward, and that awkwardness in me did not allow me to be a safe space, because I was always trying to be really smart and really clever, and and because I just didn't know what to say. And I realized that what people really need is what you said, be a safe container. Just be able to sit there and just create a safe space for a person to pour out. And when somebody has gone through something, they are not expecting you to have all the answers. And I think that's a lie that we tell ourselves as the listener, the girlfriend, or the wife, or whatever, right? You're not supposed to go in there with all of the like already made list. And I think maybe it's also because I'm a lawyer, I feel like I have to like have a solution. Like my value is in the solution, but it's not true. My value is not in the solution. My value is being present and being available. That's where my value is. And I think if we all walked into our friendships and our relationships and our marriages like that, and just appreciate that in different seasons, different stresses and strains and burdens will hit us all of us. Just be present for people, be present and allow them to pour out. And like, we talked about earlier, for those who are going through stress or feeling lonely or depression, anxiety, being brave enough to say, can I spend some time with you? And this is how I need to feel heard and loved in this season, And I think if we all, especially in this week, just kind of consciously made an effort to do that, but then make it part of our life. Right. I'm not saying you can save everyone, but we all have people within our circle of influence that we are responsible for. And we are also in people's circle of influence.
Right.
And be more conscious about our words when we approach people, not to come in with solutions, but to come in with, how can I help? Just a little bit, less talking and more listening. But when you are talking, it's not coming with any kind of judgment or preconceived idea, but just really very open questions like, how are you? Keep it open. Let the person talk. And sometimes people also talk in their silence, and I feel like sometimes there's stages that I am just comfortable. And again, that's something I had to get comfortable with, because I just felt like, okay, well, if the person is silent, then they don't really need me here, and maybe this is awkward. And actually the person just needed you to be present, even in silence. And I feel like just being silent but just sitting there and like just saying like, I'm here. Right? I could be watching something on TV. I could just be having a cup of tea, but I am here. And also, I may not say anything, but your presence reminds me that I am not alone. And maybe that's all I need for the season that I'm in.
I agree. I think that when you said choosing your words, people always say, oh, declutter. Like, let to somebody who feels like they've been dealing and carrying things for such a long time,
Yeah.
and that they've been carrying this load and carrying this load and carrying this load, you kind of brushing off by saying, oh, it gets better. Like, what does that even mean? Life doesn't, for anyone, randomly just get better. You know, it's working with people and getting the help that you need to understand that you're not trying to fix a problem overnight, but you need the resource to help you understand your ability to view life and function and handle life with all that happens in it, the highs, the lows, the ups and downs. Because when someone is suicidal, like, often we tend to find ourselves trying to convince their pain to just go away. And that's not necessarily the best thing to do, because you can't convince somebody that their pain is going to go away like this, or to just stay strong when they've been doing it for a long time. It's trying to help them understand that joy will come, and that there's support around you, and that you don't have to deal with the hard times by yourself, right? And because you don't know what type of stress or trauma that they've experienced, and what they're dealing with mentally and emotionally. And a lot of times you could just brush it off, and they might feel better for a minute, and then it comes right back. This is the whole point and purpose of trying to help them get help, and letting them know that on this journey of hardship that you are experiencing, whatever the season you're in, how many seasons you have, you're not really doing it by yourself. But you really need to help them get like the proper, education of suicide prevention, and even for yourself, of how do I become more aware. And like we said, it's the things that people say, but sometimes it's the things that people don't say, and the things that you expect them to say that they don't say, and instead paying attention to what they say instead, which is still, what I said earlier. I feel like a burden. I can't carry this anymore. I'm doing this all by myself. I feel broken. I feel invalidated. And we owe the people that we love in our life to have a sense of belonging, right? And create a sense of togetherness and community, where they don't feel like they're by themselves. And that is something, like I said, I didn't feel, because you don't know what people are carrying. So I hope that, all of you guys, I mean, we're coming to an end, but I hope all of you guys have taken some nuggets from today's live. We're going to come back in the next, like, a week or two. We're going to have a guest on. She's absolutely amazing. And we'll talk to her about, suicide prevention in women and in mothers. And then I will do another one where we talk about it in men, for sure. So, like, specifically, so for all of those who, Bel, who might be in your area, who are dealing with suicidal thoughts or ideation, do you have any resources for them in Africa that they can reach out to at all?
So we don't have the same. It's not as organized across the different countries, on the continent. But in each country, there are a number of counselors. I know a lot of people within um, religious institutions will have counselors. Sometimes the problem is the religious institution, so then it doesn't work. And I think that's a problem that we have, where we don't have as many counselors per head as we should. And certainly, no, in most countries, you will not have like a national suicide prevention hotline, etc. And so I think it's really even more important that we have these sort of de facto groups within our friendship groups and our families. And a lot of the universities will have counselors on standby.
Mm-hmm.
There is no shame seeking help. Every single person needs help at some point. And I think where you're in an institution like a university or a religious group or whatever, where you do have counseling formally available to you,
Mm-hmm.
there is no shame in going to it. I really encourage people to seek help. But I also encourage, us, because we've got to do a lot of this informally, for us to be just more mindful in
Mm-hmm.
our circle of friends, but also more mindful. I feel like sometimes we get to be the like the word you use, primary love, right? From a
Mhm.
complete stranger. Like sometimes you walk into a business or an office or a shop where you don't know what that person has gone through, but your kindness gets to create a pool of primary love for somebody who's maybe not in your circle, and just having that kind conversation and just being thoughtful and respectful and complimentary, to a man or to a woman, just saying like, hey, you know what, I recognize you're doing a great job or whatever. You don't know what that could do for somebody. And so I feel like just always keep your love on, and be attentive to those who are in your circle.
Yeah. Here, in the US, the statistics number one is that every 15 to 20 minutes a person dies by suicide in the US. And so I can only imagine what it's like for all of those in different parts of the country who's watching in different parts of the world. And suicide is like the third leading cause of death in young people, especially between the ages of 13 and 25. Men are more likely to commit suicide than women. 50% of suicide, usually people die by firearms, right? And I think that, having your circle of friends, reaching out to resources. There's a number that you can call, which is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which is 1-800-273-TALK. Like, just if you need to talk to somebody, talk to somebody. And if you are feeling like it's overwhelming and you can't do it and you feel alone, and think before I'll say this for me. I thought about this before doing anything that could cause any harm to myself, is, what I could be losing if I don't try to help me in that way. Like, I want to be able to try everything I can, to save me and to rid these feelings and create and try everything at my extension of hope, because most people feel like they're a burden and that there's no hope and that things are never going to get better, right? But before you do anything, try all of your resources and options and think, let me give myself a fighting chance to turn it around.
Yeah.
And it may not have happened when I've tried the other times, but it only takes, one more try of effort, and that could be the effort that you need. That could be the try, that could be the answer, that could be the resource that you need, that could save your life and change your life. So we'll see you guys next time. For all of those who popped in and commented, thank you. For everybody whose comments I couldn't get to, I will respond to every single person. And until next time, remember, life matters. You matter. You are enough. We want you here. We love you. You are not by yourself. There is no experience, and hear me from my very heart, as somebody who has experienced levels of trauma that they don't even make movies out of, right? You can and you will get through it, and you are not alone, and it can be better for you. And I love you from the sincerest center of my very heart. You belong here, and I want you here. And we all need you here. Okay? Until next time, you guys. Love you so much. Bye.